When Subnautica first begins after the player crash lands on a planet, they must first find resources that they can use to survive. The basics include food and water, and there are also many metals such as copper and silver that the player can use to craft new items, such as more advanced equipment for their suit, and tools that they can use to explore and build in the depths of Subnautica.
The Aurora suffered orbital hull failure. Cause unknown.
The escape pod is how the player manages for most of the beginning of Subnautica. On it are a radio, a fabricator, and a first aid kit fabricator. The fabricator is what the player uses to make new tools, some clothing, and other things the player can use to progress in the game. The radio is actually how a lot of the narrative is fed to the player. On it, the player will receive coordinates and messages from other life pods. After the player gets these messages, an on-screen beacon will appear that guides the player to the life pod. Inside of these wrecks are data disks and scannable tools that the player can use to progress in the game. Also, there are tablets that give the player hints about what life was like on the Aurora and other clues to the world of the game. The first thing the player notices when they jump in the water is the beauty of the underwater landscape. It's very beautiful. The graphics in this game are really great. The only issue with the graphics is that, as you may have seen already, there's an enormous amount of pop-in. So if you're going fast in some later game vehicles, they will see a lot of pop-in, and that will break the immersion of the game. In other respects, the game is very immersive, and the soundtrack, the sound design of the whole game is amazing. You really feel like you're underwater. You're in that muted sound. You're around fishes, and you're around these weird monsters, this coral, these plants, and as you progress into the game and go into the deeper waters, it gets even more immersive as there is no really natural sunlight. All there is the deep, dark depths of the ocean. The most basic tool that you can have in Subnautica is the scanner tool. The whole game kind of revolves around this idea that you can scan in items that you find in various places around the map. By scanning in items, you can learn more about them and build them yourself. The scanning tool is essentially the gateway to building all the other equipment in the game. So how does one progress in Subnautica? The main method is by exploration. Throughout the map, there are many hidden things to find. Some of these objects are part of the radio missions, but others the player must find on their own. One of the more annoying parts of the game, in my opinion, is finding the objects you need to scan in order to be able to craft them. Most objects require around 2 to 4 scanned objects, but other requires a lot more. If you're new to the game and you haven't watched anyone really play it, you might find yourself going around the depths of the ocean searching for wrecks or using the wiki to find the exact location of these wrecks to find the special parts you need to scan. I spent many hours searching for these wrecks and then searching inside the wrecks for the exact unlocked I needed. The ideal way to find these wrecks is by using the scanner room, which is a building that the player can construct as part of their base. An experienced player will know that they should build multiple bases around the map, and then will have a scanner room in each of these bases so they can easily find the resources. Unfortunately, the game doesn't really do anything to hint at this method, and instead many players will build one scanner room, and then they'll artistfully search around the ocean for what seems like days for all the things they need. In future updates, I would like to see a fast travel system between the bases that the player constructs. Not only would this take out the monotonous diving simulator aspect of the game, where the player is swimming or driving one of their vehicles around the map, but it would also encourage the player to build bases in more parts of the map, which would aid the player significantly in finding the parts they needed to upgrade their tools and other parts that allow the player to progress. Now let's talk about base building. Base building in Subnautica follows much more of a practical approach than it does a creative one. The player is given basic parts that can connect certain rooms that aid the player in the game, but there are only a few rooms that serve as aesthetics while almost all the base building is done to progress the game for practical purposes. If someone is looking for a building game that will stretch their creativity, this isn't it. But the cool machines that the player can build inside of these bases will excite those that really enjoy building more practical buildings that serve a purpose for their mission. Another thing that Subnautica excels at is the level design. All of the underwater biomes, of which there are more than 20, are crafted extremely well and diversely. Whenever the player travels in between these biomes, they feel like they're going to a totally different place. Some of these biomes house much more hostile and deadly creatures, while others have friendly creatures that will not harm the player. But in the biomes with the deadly creatures, the player will find much more interesting items, but at the risk of dying or losing one of their vehicles. Throughout my playthrough of the game, which lasted around 24 hours, I only died once, and it was to oxygen deprivation. But if the player is not careful, they can easily find themselves in a situation where a giant sea creature is ripping apart their vehicle. As the player progresses through the game, they unlock more and more vehicles that enable the player to travel faster and reach new depths. The first vehicle the player unlocks is the Sea Glide, which is a little underwater scooter that increases the player's swimming speed. The next vehicle is the Sea Moth, which is the first vehicle that allows the player to renew their oxygen supply without going to the surface, which is a huge help when you're exploring wrecks. The Sea Moth is the fastest of all the vehicles, so it's also great for getting around the map. The next two vehicles, the Cyclops and the Prawn Suit, allow the player to go to much deeper locations. The Prawn Suit also allows the attachment of a drill arm that allows the player to collect ores from large resource deposits, eliminating the grind for smaller deposits that happened in the early game. So you might be thinking like right now, is this one of those normal open world survival games that have been super popular and many of which have been terrible? Is this another DayZ, essentially? And the answer is no, it's not. Subnautica is probably one of the best examples of an open world survival game. While a lot of those games don't have any narrative or don't have any story at all, it's really just up to the player to come up with their story. Subnautica has a very well written story. Now, the narrative isn't something that you have to do at certain points. It's something that you can just be like, oh, let's go back to the story now. And a lot of times, although I have the ability to progress the story, I just feel like lounging back, sitting around, building new things, or going exploring in the underwater world is a lot more fun than going on the narrative. But the narrative is very, very good. The narrative is what really distinguishes this game from the crowd, and it's what separates it from the other survival single-player games, or multiplayer games for that matter, because it's just so well written and so intriguing and so interesting. And also, Subnautica is one of those games that has these holy moments throughout the game that just completely take you on a ride that you were not expecting. When you first get on this watery world, I don't want to even spoil anything, so I won't say anything, but it's not as simple as it seems here. And as soon as you find these incredible hidden gems, it's like, holy shit, what is going on here? I want to know more about this world, and that just drives the story along naturally. So right now, it's about a month after the official release of Subnautica, and it's only available on PC and Mac OS. In the future, it's going to be available on the Xbox and on the PlayStation, but right now, it is exclusive to Mac and PC. Right now, I think the developers still have a little bit to do when it comes to getting the king side of the game. For instance, a lot of the people who have bought this game for the VR capabilities of it have been really disappointed because the VR support is terrible. So if you're looking to buy this game for the VR, don't yet. If developers fix that, then you should buy it. But right now, the VR support is terrible, and you should not buy it for that. Also, the pop-in is a huge problem. So once the developers fix that, and I think they're also thinking about adding in more updates and a new biome, possibly an Arctic biome, and possibly a new vehicle to get through ice or something like that, then the game becomes even more marketable than it already is. Right now, I would already say that if you're interested in an open world survival game and crafting and stuffing like that, then this game is definitely for you and should definitely go out and buy it. And even if you just want a good story, a good interesting story, then this game is also for you. So let's go ahead and get to the pros and cons of this game. On the positive side, Subnautica has excellent graphics that will often leave you in a state of awe. The sound design is also great. You feel like you're really swimming on an alien planet. My only issue is that the electronic soundtrack doesn't always match with the environments, although some of the music, like the one that you're listening to right now, does a really good job of enhancing the environment. The story is also pretty compelling and interesting, and is far better than the average survival game. The atmosphere that surrounds the player throughout the game is hard to beat. I don't think I've ever played a game that has enveloped me so much in its world that you feel like you're really a part of it. The exploration in Subnautica is also excellent. There always seems like there's something new to discover, and the biome diversity really adds to the incentive for the player to go out and find other places. The crafting system is sophisticated, but not really grindy like other survival games. It strikes a nice balance. The progression will also keep playing, as there's always something new to craft or a new spot to build a new base. And the level design is some of the best. Every part of the map feels like the developer really put their love into it. On the negative side, the pop-in detracts from an otherwise exceptionally immersive game. The hard-to-find items that the player needs to scan so that you can craft them really throws a wrench into the cogs, and you'll find yourself spending hours trying to find the one last piece that you need to scan so you can craft something. Also, the replayability of the game is essentially non-existent. There are different game modes, such as the creative mode, so if you find the base building interesting, you may like that, but other than that, different playthroughs will not result in different endings. In addition to this, the player will also need to consult a wiki for many things throughout the game. Ideally, if the player builds many scanner rooms, they may not need the wiki, but there are some things that are very hard to find, and using the wiki will save you a lot of time treading water. Overall, the game needs some polish but has the concept down great. In future updates, Subnautica will reach its ultimate state, and future editions have the ability to really enhance the game. With a few minor tweaks here and there, Subnautica has the ability to be one of the greatest survival games of all time.